Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Chapter 4, Text 19. इत्यावेदितार्धाय माह्यं स भगवान् परः आदिदेशार्विन्दाक्ष आत्मना परमां स्थितिम्.
When I thus expressed my heartfelt desires unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the lotus eyed Lord instructed me about his transcendental situation.
Text 20. Sa eva maradhit pad tirtha dadhi tatatvam tam vibodh marga pranmay pado parivartya deva miha gatoham virhaturatma.
I have studied the path of understanding self knowledge from my spiritual master, the personality of Godhead, and thus, after circumambulating him, I have come to this place very much aggrieved due to separation.
Text 21. सोऽहं तद्दर्शनाहलाद वियोगात् irtiyutah प्रभो गमिष्य दयितं तस्या बदर्याक्षं mandalam.
My dear Vidur, now I am mad for want of the pleasure of seeing him, and just to mitigate this, I am now proceeding to Badrikashram in the Himalayas for association, as I have been instructed by him.
Text 22. Yat narayano devo narascha bhagwan rishi mridu tivram tapo dirgham taepate lok bhavano.
There, in Badrikashram, the personality of Godhead, in his incarnation as the sages Nara and Narayan, has been undergoing great penance since time immemorial for the welfare of all amiable living entities.
Text 23. Sheshuka vacha ityo yudvadupakarnya suhrdam duhsaham vadham jnanena shamya takshata shokmutpatim tam buddha.
Shri Sukadev Goswami said, after hearing from Uddhav all about the annihilation of his friends and relatives, the learned Vidur pacified his overwhelming bewilderment by dint of his transcendental knowledge.
Text 24. Satam Mahabhagavatam Brajantam Korvarshabha Vishrambhadabheda Tedam Mukhyam Krishna Parigrahe.
While Uddhav, the chief and most confidential amongst the devotees of the Lord, was going away, Vidur in affection and confidence questioned him.
Vidaruvacha Jnanam Paramam Savatmara Prakasham Yada Yogeshwar Ishwar Vaktum Bhavano Hratija Divishnu Rabhatya Swabhartya Grartha Kritsracharanti.
Vidur said, O Uddhav, because the servants of Vishnu, the Lord, wander in the interest of serving others, it is quite fit that you kindly describe the self knowledge with which you have been enlightened by the Lord Himself.
Text 26. Uddhavacha Nanu te tat sanradhe rishiko sharvontike sakshad bhagavata dishto marte lokam jihasata.
Shri Uddhav said, you may take lessons from the great learned sage Maitreya, who is nearby and who is worshipable by reception of transcendental knowledge. He was directly instructed by the personality of Godhead while he was about to quit this mortal world.
Text 27. Shishukavacha iti savidhurin vishwamurte dragun kathya sudhyat lapvitorutapaha kshanmev pulne yamasvasu suttam samoshitopagan gavirnisham tatogat.
Sukadev Goswami said, O king, after thus discussing with Vidur the transcendental name, fame, qualities, etc., on the bank of the Yamuna, Uddhav was overwhelmed with great affliction. He passed the night as if it were a moment, and thereafter he went away.
Text 28. Rajovacha Nidhanmupgateषु Rishnibhoje Shavadhirthayutpayuthpeshu mukhya Satu katham vashisht udvayadhir Rapi tatajya jakritam tridisha.
The king inquired, at the end of the pastimes of the Lord of the three worlds, Sri Krishna, and after the disappearance of the members of the Vrishni and Bhoja dynasties, who were the best of the great commanders, why did Uddhav alone remain?
Text 29. Shishukavacha Brahma ब्राह्मणशापापदेशेन काले नामोवाचितः संहत्य सकुल सफितं तयक्षण्य दे मचिन्तयत्.
Sukadev Goswami replied, my dear king, the cursing of the Brahmanas was only a plea, but the actual fact was the supreme desire of the Lord. He wanted to disappear from the face of the earth after dispatching his excessively numerous family members. He thought to himself as follows.
Text 30. अस्माल्लोकादुपर्यते मयि ज्ञानमदाश्रयाम् अर्हत्य युद्धव एवादधा सम्प्रत्यात्मवतां वरः.
Now I shall leave the vision of this mundane world, and I see that Uddhav, the foremost of my devotees, is the only one who can be directly entrusted with knowledge about me.
Text 31. नोद्धवो नवपि मन्युनो यद्गुणैर्नार्दितप्रभु अतो मद्वयूनं लोकं ग्राहय निहतिष्ठतु.
Uddhav is not inferior to me in any way because he is never affected by the modes of material nature. Therefore, he may remain in this world in order to disseminate specific knowledge of the personality of Godhead.
Text 32. एवं त्रिलोकगुरुणा संदिष्ट शब्दयोनिना भद्राश्रमसाध्या हरिमीजे समाधिना.
Sukadev Goswami informed the king that Uddhav, being thus instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the source of all Vedic knowledge and the spiritual master of the three worlds, reached the pilgrimage site of Bhadrik Ashram and engaged himself there in trance to satisfy the Lord.
Text 33. विद्रोऽप्युद्भवाश्रुत्वा कृष्णस्य परमात्मना क्रीड्योपातदेहस्य कर्माणि श्लाघितानि च.
Vidura also heard from Uddhav about the appearance and disappearance of Lord Krishna, the Supersoul, in the mortal world, which is the subject matter sought after the great perseverance by the great sages.
Text 34. देहन्यासं च ते एवं धीराणाधैर्यवर्धनम् अन्येषां दुष्कर्तरं पशूनां विकलवात्मनाम्.
The Lord's glorious acts and his acceptance of various transcendental forms for the performance of extraordinary pastimes in the mortal world are very difficult for anyone other than his devotees to understand, and for the beasts, they are simply a mental disturbance.
Text 35. आत्मानं च कुरु श्रेष्ठ कृष्णेन मनसेक्षितं ध्यायन् गते भागवते रुरोत्प्रेम विहल्वलः.
Understanding that he was remembered by Lord Krishna while quitting this world, Vidur began to cry loudly, overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love.
Text 36. कालिन्दः कितिभिः सिद्ध अहोभिर्भरत भरतश्रभा प्रापद्यत्सवा सरितं यत्र मित्रासुतो मुनिः.
After passing a few days on the bank of the river Yamuna, Vidur, the self realized soul, reached the bank of Ganges where the great sage Maitreya was situated. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, fourth chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Vidur Approaches Maitreya. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Shabani Mataji and Girish Prabhuji. So nicely recited. So Nikhil Prabhuji has joined now. Hare Krishna, Nikhil Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Hare Krishna, dear devotees.
So nice to see you today, Nikhil Prabhu. How are you?
Yes, okay, Mataji. Yes,
Thank you.
been a long
That's-
time.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So over to you now. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Am I able to share my screen?
Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, thank you, Mataji. Okay, so first of all, we'll do the Mangalacharan and then we'll get started. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatamitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahalalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So thank you everyone for coming. It's a bit of a last minute thing, so I'm not so well prepared. I'm actually just covering for Shriya Mataji, who's not feeling well at the moment, so she was unable to take the class. So you'll have to put up with an inferior class from myself. As you know, Shriya Mataji has given many wonderful classes on Chad. And actually, just to add, actually, Mataji recently received initiation in Sri Dham Mayapur from His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj. So her name is now Sri Lalita Susevani Devidasi. So please send her your prayers and blessings so that she can, follow the instructions of a spiritual master very nicely and continue to give nice classes on the Chad sessions. So anyway, I will share my screen. 1 second. Okay, so we've obviously we've gone through the whole chapter just now with a wonderful recitation. So as we know, Vidura, he's been hearing from Uddhava, and now the stage is being set to prepare for a great conversation between Vidura and Maitreya Muni. So first Vidura is hearing from Uddhava, and then after that, he will begin to hear from Maitreya. So just kind of setting the stage for that right at the end of the chapter. So yeah, we are basically finishing the chapter today. Okay, so if we start with text 33. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Viduro Pyuddhavak Shrutva Krishnasya Paramatmanah Kridayo Patta Dehasya Karmani Shlagitani Cha. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Vidura also heard from Uddhava about the appearance and disappearance of Lord Krishna, the Supersoul, in the mortal world, which is a subject matter sought after with great perseverance by the great sages. Purport. The subject matter of the appearance and disappearance of the Supersoul, Lord Sri Krishna, is a mystery even for the great sages. The word Paramatmanaha is significant in this verse. An ordinary living being is generally called the Atma, but Lord Krishna is never an ordinary living being because he is Paramatma, the Supersoul. Yet his appearance as one of the human beings and his disappearance again from the mortal world are subject matters for the research workers who execute research work with great perseverance. Such subject matters are certainly of increasing interest because the researchers have to search out the transcendental abode of the Lord, which he enters after finishing his pastimes in the mortal world. But even the great sages have no information that beyond the material sky is the spiritual sky where Sri Krishna eternally resides with his associates. Although at the same time, he exhibits his pastimes in the mortal world in all the universes, one after another. This fact is confirmed in Brahma Samhita 537. Goloka eva nivasatya kilatma bhutaha. The Lord, by his inconceivable potency, resides in his eternal abode, Goloka. Yet at the same time as the Supersoul, he is present everywhere, in both the spiritual and material skies, by his multi-varieties of manifestation. Therefore, his appearance and disappearance are simultaneously going on, and no one can say definitely which of them is the beginning and which is the end. His eternal pastimes have no beginning or end, and one has to learn of them from the pure devotee only, and not waste valuable time in so-called research work. So we're just going to go through each verse one by one and share a few points, a bit of discussion, and then we can finish with questions as normal. Okay, so we're hearing about the pastimes of the Lord, and specifically it's mentioned here, the appearance and disappearance of the Lord. And this point that it's sought after with great perseverance by the great sages means it's not easy to understand. As Prabhupada says in the first sentence of the purport, it's a mystery even for great sages. So, what are these pastimes? If we have a look at the word for word translation, the Sanskrit actually mentions kridaya. So Prabhupada says here, for the sake of pastimes in the mortal world. But literally, this word krida, means play. It actually means play. So these pastimes, this is actually Krishna at play, similarly, you could say like a child playing. Similarly, obviously, Krishna is, not on the same level as ordinary child, but still, this is how Krishna is enjoying through these pastimes in the material world. This is actually Krishna's enjoyment. He's actually enjoying these pastimes in the material world. So this word krida is used, play. So it's basically, as we all know, Krishna doesn't need to come personally to do all of these things. He can do everything, he can achieve everything through his own energies. So why does he even bother coming? It's for his own pleasure. It's because it's for his own enjoyment, because he wants to. That's one of the main reasons. And obviously, another main reason is that Krishna wants to be with his devotees. He's coming with his associates, with his devotees, and performing pastimes with them. And that is his enjoyment. And we'll hear a bit later in one of the later verses today about that relationship between Krishna and his devotees. So this point about Krishna appearing, disappearing, his pastimes, Prabhupada is saying that those are trying to research into it. They have to search out the transcendental abode of the Lord. So they have to, like, great perseverance. So it means, they have to put a lot of effort into it. It's a lot of hard work to understand the Lord. So it's kind of hinted in one sense. There is a way to understand, and actually an easier way to understand, and that is to become a devotee. And how do we get to that point? We have to learn from other devotees. So that's why Prabhupada says one has to learn of these pastimes from the pure devotee only, and not waste valuable time in so-called research work. And why do we want to understand the appearance and disappearance, these pastimes? Why is it important for us? We'll have a look at the Bhagavad Gita. I'm sure we all know this verse very well. Chapter 4, text 9. Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tattvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma neti mameti sojana. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. So this is why we should want to understand, because then we never have to take birth again in the material world, and we attain the Lord's eternal abode, which, as we know, is Goloka Vrindavan. So this is the result of understanding Krishna's appearance, his activities, his disappearance. As it said here, Janma, birth, karma, work. And all of this is transcendental. It's not like our kind of birth, our activities, our death. It's transcendental. It's nothing material. So, and it says here, one who can understand the truth of the appearance of the personality of Godhead is already liberated from material bondage, and therefore he returns to the kingdom of God immediately after quitting this present material body. And then Prabhupada is saying that, on the other hand, for impersonalist yogis, they attain liberation only after much trouble and many, many births. Even then, the liberation they achieve, merging into the impersonal Brahma Jyoti of the Lord, is only partial, and there is the risk of returning to this material world. But the devotee, simply by understanding the transcendental nature of the body and activities of the Lord, attains the abode of the Lord after ending this body, and does not run the risk of returning to this material world. So, if we try to follow these more, Prabhupada is saying, these more difficult paths, the impersonalist path, the path of the yogis, achieving impersonal liberation, after taking so much effort, so much pains to achieve that, it's not necessarily permanent, and ultimately you will still fall back down to the earthly plane. So it's not actually worth all that effort, if you have to come back anyway. So yeah, I was actually, sorry, one second. Okay. So I was actually reading the Bhagavad Gita yesterday, and some of the things which I read yesterday are very much related to this topic that we're talking about today. So again, just another example of Krishna's amazing arrangement that yesterday, before I knew I was going to give this class, by Krishna's arrangement, I read things which were relevant to the class. So Krishna knew, this was going to happen the next day. So this was his arrangement. But anyway, so in the purport to Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, text 24, it says, Prabhupada says, one cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, or his form, quality, or name, simply by mental speculation or by discussing Vedic literature. One must understand him by devotional service. When one is fully engaged in Krishna consciousness, beginning by chanting the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, then only can one understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the way, through devotion, through devotional service, starting with chanting. As we all know, starting with Shravanam Kirtanam, hearing and chanting. And then Prabhupada also mentions that non-devotee impersonalists think that Krishna has a body made of this material nature and that all his activities, form, and everything are Maya. Sorry. These impersonalists are known as Mayavadis. They do not know the ultimate truth. So here, going back to this verse where Krishna is saying that one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance activities. So because those impersonalists, those Mayavadis, they think it's not transcendental, it's material, that he takes a material body, and therefore he is under the control of the modes of material nature. That's what they think. So they can never understand. They can never understand God. They can never understand Krishna. So it has to be through devotion. And as we said, we have to learn all this from the pure devotee only. So on this point of research work, scientists have always been trying to figure out the world around us, the universe, the big questions of life, how everything came from, how the universe started, and trying to figure out how everything works. And as we all know, we hear about these two ways of obtaining knowledge, the ascending process, like the scientist trying to get that knowledge. And then we have the descending process, which is the process of gathering knowledge, which devotees follow, that we receive it. It descends, that knowledge, from the Vedic scriptures and ultimately from Krishna. That's the way to receive perfect knowledge. And if we try to follow the ascending process, to try and kind of grab that knowledge ourselves by our, like Prabhupada says here, so-called research work, we will find it very difficult. And I always like to give the analogy of a jigsaw puzzle. So I'm sure many of us used to do jigsaw puzzles when we were children. Maybe we still do. But when you have a jigsaw puzzle, probably maybe you have a picture of nature or something, like a forest scene or something, and there's animals and there's trees and flowers and maybe there's clouds, maybe there's the sun. So if you just say there's a section of the puzzle which is the sky, and there's a few pieces. So say if you only had a few pieces from that sky section of the puzzle, and if you just think, okay, this must be the whole picture. The whole picture is just sky. So you're assuming just based on those few pieces of the puzzle that the whole puzzle is like that. And then, then you may get another piece of the puzzle and, oh, this is a tree. Okay, now I have to rethink my whole understanding of the picture. And then, oh, I found a bird. Okay, now I have to rethink it again. And similarly, we see in the news, every month, maybe even every week, a new discovery, and the headline is, this new discovery, and then scientists have to rethink history, or they have to rethink their story of history based on this new discovery. And then another year later, something else will come, and again and again and again. So it's constantly getting another piece of the puzzle, and then trying to apply that to the full picture, and then again find another piece like that. It just keeps going. Whereas if we just get the knowledge from Krishna, from the Vedic scriptures, then it's just like we're given the whole puzzle already done. We don't have to worry where each piece goes, what does it look like. It's already done for us. It's just given. So it's a lot easier. Okay, so, and obviously we have this point, where was it? Yeah, so where it mentions like these pastimes are always going on, and his appearance and disappearance are simultaneously going on, and saying these eternal pastimes have no beginning or end. So this has been explained compared to the sun, the rising and setting of the sun. So it's just like the sun rising. This is compared to Krishna, coming to a particular universe and performing his pastimes on the in the mortal world, as Prabhupada says here. And then when Krishna leaves, it's like the setting of the sun. But obviously we know the sun rises and sets and then rises again. So it's explained that it's like the son of Krishna then rises in another universe, sets, rises, and like that. So constantly going on. So there's never a point when these pastimes are not happening. And then I've heard from devotees in classes who've kind of gone even deeper into this point. So I've heard some explain. I remember a class at the manor from one senior devotee. I cannot remember who it was. Explaining that it's even more. Actually, I have read about this as well. Actually, that even more than that, it's like we have all these many different pastimes. So in one universe, Krishna performs the first pastime. Then, while he then performs the next pastime, he performs the first pastime in the next universe. Then, while he's performing the third pastime in the first universe, he then performs the second pastime in the second universe and first pastime in the third universe, and etc., etc. So it's actually each pastime. So that's why all the pastimes are going on at the same time. So it can get very complicated, but yeah, that's why Prabhupada is saying you can't figure out the beginning or the end because they're just constantly happening in a cycle. And it's interesting that it's explained, and I think Keshav Maharaj explained it not too long ago in a class. No, not in a class, in a Sangha actually that I attended. He explained a few differences between Goloka Vrindavan and Vrindavan on earth, Bhoma Vrindavan. And the one that really stood out for me is that the so-called birth pastimes, the appearance pastime, or if you like, the Janmashtami pastime, actually doesn't happen in Goloka Vrindavan. So that's in one way that we are very fortunate that Krishna, when Krishna comes, he appears in the material world, he performs pastimes which he doesn't perform in Goloka Vrindavan, because Krishna is just always there, so in Goloka Vrindavan it's not that, it wouldn't make sense to have the birth pastime, but here in the material world, because he's coming down, it makes sense to have that birth pastime, because that's where it starts here in the material world. So, but then you might ask, okay, I thought all the pastimes are eternal. So if it's not happening in Goloka Vrindavan, does that mean that it's not eternal? No, those pastimes, Janmashtami pastimes, in the jail cell, all of that, that's also eternal, because like we just said, at any one time, it's always happening in one universe. So in that sense, Krishna's pastimes in the material world are also eternal. And in that sense, we say that material world is temporary, but it's also eternal, in the sense that everything is temporary, everything ends, but there will always be a material world and a spiritual world. There will, just as there are always souls, reaching spiritual perfection, going back to Godhead, there will always be souls falling down to the material world. And why is that? It's because the living entities are infinite. Just as Krishna is infinite, the living entities are infinitely coming from Krishna. So, even if, many, many, many souls go back to Godhead, naturally there will be other souls coming back down because they're infinite. So there will be, other souls decide to try and become the controller, like we did, and come down here. So in that sense, there we can say there's eternally a material world, but as we know, everything gets destroyed and then restarted again and again and again, like that. But yeah. Okay, so we should move on to the next verse. Spend a bit of time on that one. Yeah, okay. So this is text 34. Dehanyasam cha tasyaivam dhiranam dhairyavardhanam anyesham dushkarataram pashunam viklavatmanam. Translation: the Lord's glorious acts and his acceptance of various transcendental forms for the performance of extraordinary pastimes in the mortal world are very difficult for anyone other than his devotees to understand. And for the beasts, they are simply a mental disturbance. Purport: the transcendental forms and pastimes of the Lord, as described in Bhagavad Gita, are difficult subject matters for those who are not devotees to understand. The Lord never reveals himself to persons like the Jnanis and Yogis, and there are others who, because of their envying the Lord from the bottom of their hearts, are classified amongst the beasts. And for such envious beasts, the subject matter of the Lord's appearance and disappearance is simply a mental disturbance. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7:15, the miscreants who are simply concerned with material enjoyment, who work very hard like beasts of burden, can hardly know the personality of Godhead at any stage due to asurika bhava, or a spirit of revolt against the Supreme Lord. The transcendental bodily expansions manifested by the Lord for his pastimes in the mortal world, and the appearance and disappearance of such transcendental expansions, are difficult subject matters and those who are not devotees are advised not to discuss the Lord's appearance and disappearance, lest they commit further offenses at the lotus feet of the Lord. The more they discuss the transcendental appearance and disappearance of the Lord in the Asuric spirit, the more they enter into the darkest region of hell, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 16:20. Anyone who is against the transcendental loving service of the Lord is more or less a beastly creature, as confirmed in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, so we're hearing that the Lord takes on many different forms, and actually he takes on infinite forms, and all of these are transcendental forms. All of these are eternal forms. And we're hearing again about, those who are envious of the Lord, those who are Mayavadis, or those who are impersonalists, and also those who are demonic. They cannot, they can hardly know the personality of Godhead at any stage, because they have this spirit of revolt against the Supreme Lord. So those who are devotees, I don't know if I have it here, actually. Anyway, so the devotees understand their position as a servant of the Lord. They understand that the aim of their life is to serve the Lord, whereas those who are demonic, the miscreants, they consider themselves the controller. They don't consider themselves a servant, so they don't understand their actual constitutional position. So we know that the Lord has infinite forms, infinite expansions, and only a few of these are mentioned by name in Srimad Bhagavatam. Over 20, but I think less than 30. So anyway, between 20 and 30 expansions or incarnations, sorry, are mentioned, and then obviously the famous verse after that saying that Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, that all these are just incarnations, expansions, partial expansions of the Supreme Lord, but Sri Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's the original. So yeah, he actually has, it's described just like the waves of the ocean are limitless. We cannot count them. Similarly, we cannot count the incarnations of Krishna. And just on this point, very briefly, I was just about 2 weeks ago, I came back from a retreat in South India, School of Bhakti retreat to South India. So we went for about 10 days. I'm just mentioning this because the first place we went to is Ahobilam Dham, which is the actual place where Nrsingadev appeared. And we saw the Ugra Stamba. This is the place where the actual pillar where the Lord appeared from to protect Prahlad Maharaj. You can still go there. The location is marked. There's a massive cliff face showing where the pillar is, and there's a flag on top as well marking where it is. So it's a very powerful place, and Ahobilam is also famous for 9 temples of Nrsingadev, 9 different forms of Nrsingadev. So we visited these temples as well, and it was just amazing because it's like in a mountainous area, and there's a forests there as well. And I just remember seeing the Stamba for the first time. Like we're climbing up, we're walking up, the slopes, and then just kind of like through a gap in the trees, just saw the site of this, and it's very powerful because because we always hear about this pastime. We always hear all the time, and every day we do the Nishingadev prayers. We're always hearing about this pastime, but then to actually go there, yeah, it's amazing. And also amazing because it's supposed to have happened in Satya Yuga, and yet we still have the location clearly marked. We can actually visit it. So again, Nishingadev is one of these transcendental forms, and therefore that form is eternal. And someone might say, but he only appeared, he appeared, he protected Prahlad Maharaj, and then he left, isn't it? Well, obviously, other scriptures explain further that he doesn't leave straight away, and other things happen afterwards. But also, in general, these forms are all eternal, just like we are saying, the pastimes are all eternal. So therefore, this pastime of the Lord appearing as Nishingadev is eternal, and happening in one universe after another after another. So all of these forms are actually eternal. And just like is explained that in whatever form of the Lord we feel naturally most connected to, that is the way in which Krishna relates with us. This is explained in the Bhagavatam as well. So therefore, those whose constitutional position is to have a relationship with Krishna, they will go back to Krishna. If it's Lord Ram, they will go to Lord Ram's abode. They'll go to the Ayodhya in the spiritual world. And similarly, there may be those who are eternal devotees of Lord Nishingadev. So again, this point that he is also eternal, they will go to the abode of Nishingadev. This is explained, I think not in the Bhagavatam, but I think I read it in Brihad Bhagavatamrita or something. But yeah, so yeah, there are infinite forms of the Lord, and they're all transcendental. So then, on the other hand, so then we can therefore understand that the temporary universal form that Krishna displays, as explained in the Bhagavad Gita, this is not one of the eternal forms of the Lord. And in the purports, I can't remember which purport Prabhupada explains this. This temporary form of the Lord, this universal form, is not actually one of the eternal forms of the Lord. Okay, so let's have a look. Just conscious of time, and we still have 2 verses, so let's have a look at the next one. Text 45. Atmanam chakuru shreshta krishnena manasekshitam dhyayan gate bhagavate ruroda prema vivalaha. Translation. Understanding that he was remembered by Lord Krishna while quitting this world, Vidura began to cry loudly, overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love. Purport. Vidura was overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love when he understood that Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thought of him at the last moment. Sorry. Although he thought of himself as insignificant, he was remembered by the Lord by his causeless mercy. Vidura accepted this as a great favor, and thus he cried. This crying is the last word in the progressive path of devotional service. One who can cry for the Lord in love is certainly successful in the line of devotional service. So what is this point being made here? Lord Krishna remembered Vidura when he was quitting the material world. So how is that? Because it doesn't specifically say that, in those exact words. But how we can understand this, sorry, this one. So if we go back to text 26 in this chapter, where Sri Uddhava said, "You may take lessons from the great learned sage Maitreya, who is nearby and who is worshipable for reception of transcendental knowledge. He was directly instructed by the personality of Godhead while he was about to quit this material world." And in the pastime, in the purport, Prabhupada says, since both Uddhava and Maitreya were directly instructed by the Lord, both had the authority to become the spiritual master of Vidura or anyone else. But Maitreya, being elderly, had the first claim to becoming the spiritual master, especially for Vidura, who was much older than Uddhava. So how is it that the Lord was thinking of Vidura at the end? Because just before he left the material world, he instructed Maitreya, knowing that he would then go on to be the one to pass on those instructions to Vidura. Obviously, Krishna knew exactly what was going to happen. This is all his arrangement. So he did this so that Vidura would then receive those transcendental instructions. So therefore, in this way, the Lord was actually thinking of Vidura just before he left this material world. So sorry, the buttons on the top of the Zoom screen are covering the tabs. Okay. Yeah, okay. So understanding this, understanding that the Lord was actually thinking of him, he was crying tears of spiritual ecstasy. Because Vidura is very humble, he's a very humble devotee, and he thinks he's insignificant. So how can it be that someone so insignificant like myself is being remembered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And he's considering how merciful Krishna is, how incredibly merciful. And this is how it is. When the devotee contemplates the astonishing mercy, the incredible mercy of Krishna, they cannot help but feel emotional, feel transcendental emotion, feel this transcendental ecstasy out of gratitude for the Lord's mercy. And amazing statement by Prabhupada. This crying is the last word in the progressive path of devotional service. Such a powerful point. So, but how is it, okay, we understand the devotee is meant to be thinking of Krishna. That's the aim of our life. As we know, we want to be thinking of Krishna at the time of death in order to return back to his abode. So we understand, okay, the devotee is trying to think of Krishna. But here it's so amazing because this verse is hinting that just as the devotee is always thinking of Krishna, what is Krishna always thinking of? Krishna is always thinking of his devotees. Very famous verse, which I'm sure you all have heard of. Bhagavatam 9:468. Sadhavo hridayam mayam sadhunam hridayam toham mad anyatte na jananti naham tebhyo managapi. The Lord himself is saying that the pure devotee is always within the core of my heart, and I am always in the heart of the pure devotee. My devotees do not know anything else but me, and I do not know anyone else but them. So here the Lord is making it quite clear that he is always thinking of his devotees just as they are always thinking of him, and they're always in each other's hearts. So, such a beautiful point being made by the Lord. So we see like the devotees are kind of traveling around. Krishna is instructing one devotee and then instructing them to then go to a different place and then give instructions to another devotee, like that, like he's instructing Uddhava, and then the Lord says to Uddhava, go to Badrikashram. Then but then he's also before that instructing Vidura, instructing him to go to Maitreya, and like that. So all these various devotees are passing on the mercy of the Lord, the instructions of the Lord. And in the purport to Bhagavad Gita 7:28, again, something I read yesterday, Prabhupada says, all the devotees of the Lord traverse this earth just to recover the conditioned souls from their delusion. So these devotees are passing on this knowledge about devotional service just to recover the conditioned souls from delusion and ultimately to bring them back to Krishna. And then if we go to the fourth and final verse of today and the final verse of this chapter, verse 36, Kalindya kativi siddha ahobe bharatarshava prapadyata swasaritam yatra mitra suto munihi. After passing a few days on the bank of the river Yamuna, Vidura, the self-realized soul, reached the bank of the Ganges, where the great sage Maitreya was situated. And thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, fourth chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Vidura Approaches Maitreya. So we can see finally now, at the end of the chapter, Vidura has reached this place and Maitreya is already there waiting, ready and waiting to pass on what he received, instructions he received. He's now ready to pass all of that on to Vidura, and in that way follow the Lord's instructions or achieve the Lord's desire. It was the Lord's desire for Vidura to receive this knowledge. And then we see after this, as we all know, the Bhagavatam is full of so many conversations. And this conversation between Vidura and Maitreya, it lasts for a very long time in the Bhagavatam. And, there's many different conversations within that conversation as well. So that's the end of that chapter. So we're kind of hearing about the importance of learning from the devotees, from the pure devotees. So just to finish, I know we're running out of time. In the purport to Bhagavad Gita 7:30, again, which I read yesterday, Prabhupada says that in the transcendental association of Krishna consciousness, one can understand how the Supreme Lord is the governing principle of the material manifestation and even of the demigods. Gradually, by such transcendental association, one becomes convinced of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And at the time of death, such a Krishna-conscious person can never forget Krishna. Naturally, he is thus promoted to the planet of the Supreme Lord, Goloka Vrindavan. So going back to this point about the devotee remembering the Lord, Krishna-conscious person, they can never forget Krishna at any time. And similarly, Krishna will never forget such a devotee at any time. So that such a devotee, which we are obviously all aspiring to be, should never worry that, what if somehow I don't remember Krishna? What if something goes wrong at the end of life? Does that mean I don't go back to Godhead? No, it's mentioned in scriptures more than once that if for some reason we're not able to remember Krishna, he will intervene and help us to remember him, because he can never forget such a devotee who has selflessly performed such devotional service throughout their lives. Of course, so much difficulties the body has at the end of the life. Maybe for some reason we can't remember, but Krishna never forgets our devotional service. So if we want to learn more about this process, this 7th chapter is quite nice, like Prabhupada is saying. This 7th chapter particularly explains how one can become a fully Krishna conscious person. The beginning of Krishna consciousness is association of persons who are Krishna conscious. And then explains, the effects of what this association does, effect on our consciousness, we can overcome our forgetfulness of Krishna. We can understand that this human form of life is an opportunity to regain Krishna consciousness, and that it should be fully utilized to attain the causeless mercy of the Supreme Lord. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you, the devotees.
Hare Krishna.
Hope that was okay. And I know we're kind of finishing, but yeah, if there are any quick questions or comments or anything, please go ahead. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Nikhil Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances, our great Srila Prabhupada. Wonderful class. As
Thank you.
I was listening very carefully, and also before I was listening to Srila Prabhupada lecture. I have a little red box which
Oh,
I
yeah,
my life and soul.
yeah.
I mean, Srila Prabhupada. That's the only way we can get in a constant association with Srila Prabhupada.
Mm,
Because more we hear from Srila Prabhupada, it's just clears the mind. Our mind is so materially attached, and it helps us to get out of that. The last lecture I had, this is we have spiritual world. That's our real place.
mm,
We need to get out. We need to get out from there. We have to go there. We are eternal. So Srila Prabhupada constantly remind us that we are eternal. Krishna is eternal, and that is our place. So that it helps us to detach from this every verse in this Bhagavatam, helping us that Vidura was so much, at the end Krishna gave him the chance, he remembered Vidura.
yeah.
And that's why Vidura was so touched that Krishna was thinking of him, because Uddhava mentioned that he was he's thinking of how Krishna is so merciful, so merciful. If we hear Srimad Bhagavatam, I feel like today, you really, though you said you didn't have time, but you really very nicely prepared yourself for the class. So I really appreciate. It was really nice hearing from you. I really had a lot of essence from your class. It was really nice.
Thank you
I
very
just want
much.
to appreciate your. I always like your lecture. It's very nice. You're very sincere devotee. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, you raised some wonderful points, especially like what you mentioned about hearing Prabhupada's lectures. I always feel it's like, like that sort of comfortable feeling you have, like say you have a long day at work, and then when you come home, it's like that feeling of now you can feel comfortable, you're at home. And I feel the same thing, like if I haven't listened to Prabhupada for a while, sorry, and then if I hear a class from Prabhupada, it feels like, oh, now I've come home, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Mm.
Yeah.
Really, because Srila Prabhupada is completely in a transcendental, transcendentally situated. So what the lecture is just absolutely so wonderful, and if it really touches my heart, I feel I'm kind of blessed. Sometimes it doesn't go to the heart because I'm not elevated, I'm not in transcendental state, but because of his um, knowledge, and trying to give us the best. And if we keep hearing, it does clear some of our debris from our heart, and it helps us to raise our consciousness. And that's why I feel that I need to hear Srila Prabhupada every day, every single day. And that's in the morning, when I get up, I just have to hear Srila Prabhupada. It helps me so much to, this ignorance, mode of ignorance, the sleep is mode of ignorance, and mode of ignorance to come out, to hear Srila Prabhupada. So that's why I keep saying to everybody that we must hear Srila Prabhupada every
Yeah.
day, every day. It helps to raise the consciousness.
Mm. Yeah, and a
Thank
couple of other things which you mentioned, like Prabhupada makes this, there's certain points which he makes in pretty much every class, just to keep reminding us, Another thing, what you were saying about Krishna remembering Vidura, he's also remembering all of us, isn't it? He's always remembering us, and he wants us all to return to him. So it's so amazing.
That's why he comes. That's why he
Yeah.
comes
Yeah.
to help us to remember. And this we are now studying this Canto 10 in our Bhakti, not the Bhakti Bible, it's called Bhakti. Anyway, we're learning with Navadip Chandra Prabhu,
Okay.
and we are doing all these pastime. How now this week we did, and Indra came and pouring, and everything is just he comes us to give this pastime for us to remember him so nicely, so nicely. And Navadip Chandra Prabhu was also explained. I know it's not related to these chapters, but it was a very nice way he kind of finished off that Indra was he was not really vindictive, that he wanted to destroy, because he was also covered that he could not understand that he's Krishna, but he also, because they were following this, the Brajavashis, they were Nanda Maharaj, they were doing this Indra Puja and all that. So it's a tradition. They were following. I mean, Indra had that is that no, they should not stop, because that's not good for them. I think on that basis, they thought, who is that? Krishna didn't allow him to understand that same. So he also wanted to protect them in that way. I think he was kind of a, kind of a doing what he was doing, not just, oh, I don't want to do this, because he didn't know it was Krishna. If he knew that, he wouldn't do that. He wanted to save their tradition, that you should not finish your tradition, just for something. So that way it was understanding was really nice. It was
I've not heard that in explaining that exact way. It's very
yeah,
interesting.
that's how Navadip Chandra Prabhu explained. It was nice to hear, because I didn't know that, and that was very nice. It's nice to hear all these pastime, wonderful. How Krishna in the Vrindavan, and how Shukadeva Goswami was also explaining every bit how the forest was kind of experiences Krishna's pastime, and the waves, they were sort of the way they were acting, they were just offering flowers and things, the way Krishna was doing all these beautiful pastime, and how each and every the flower, the bamboos, they're all like living, they're living around Krishna, and they wanted to appreciate Krishna's presence, and they were really so much in ecstasy. Vrindavan, everything is living. Everything is living. It's so nice. It's so nice to read Srimad Bhagavatam. Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Mataji. That was really sweet to hear. Any other things from any other devotees, or we can end here?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you
Hare
so
Krishna,
much for this
Mataji.
nice class. We were talking about, you said about when some more living entities are coming to this material world. So it is also said that once we reach the goal of Vrindavan, we don't come back, right? Because we remember our first time, how difficult it was here, our lifetime, how we've been in 8.4 million of species, right? So also I'm just wondering, then who comes back? Is it that others who haven't experienced this material world, they come back, or?
Yeah, so it's no one who's coming back, exactly what you said. Once you go back to Godhead, you don't come back. So these are living entities who have not yet, they're falling for the first time, just like us.
Oh, okay.
because, as I said, there's unlimited living entities, so it's hard to understand, because on one hand we understand every living entity, every soul is eternal. So in that sense, how can they kind of not be there and then come? But how can they come from Krishna? Because it's explained that all the living entities come from Krishna. So does that mean they weren't there at one point and then they come from Krishna? So does that mean, is they're not eternal, if I'm making sense? So it's hard to explain that all the time, more and more living entities are coming from Krishna, but they are all eternal as well.
Yes, Prabhuji, I think those maybe who haven't experienced this material life,
yes,
they come, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about another thing, Prabhuji, is when you were talking about Vidura crying loudly in Prabhupada's purport, when he heard that Lord Krishna was remembering him before leaving this material world. So Vidura is not an ordinary person, he was Yamraj in his past life, and during his material life in this material world, he was mostly constantly in the company of Krishna, and he was a great devotee. That's why. Now, sometimes we get posts from some people. Like recently, I got from a friend. She sent me a song in old Indian movie, and she said, when I was watching this, I was crying. Then immediately, what come to my mind is, how many people have read the pastime of the gopis separating from Krishna when Krishna was going to Mathura, and how many people have posted that, how many people have liked it, how many people have discussed about it, how many people have felt that separation, what the gopis felt when Krishna was leaving. So mostly people will send you the mundane thing. But that came into my mind, and I'm thinking, yes, Vidura has felt that separation from Krishna. But unfortunately, we don't feel that kind of separation. We should kind of cultivate it first, then maybe one day, by Krishna's mercy. And also he comes when we don't remember him. If you have been doing our spiritual life, remembering him, when at the time of death, he does come. He does come, probably. In a way or another, he sent his representative, or he sent something just to save us. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Okay, I think we should finish here. So thank you everyone for joining this chat session, and for tolerating me, giving me this opportunity to read the Srimad Bhagavatam and share the Srimad Bhagavatam. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namo. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Thank you very much for excellent class.
Hare Krishna.